to change the channel on the TV. Those were also the days when on Saturday afternoons, there was like the Saturday movie of the week that was playing. And it feels like solidly from the years 1986 to 1989, the movie of the week was Clash of the Titans, or Conan the Barbarian, or something along those lines, something kind of fantastical. I loved all that stuff. I read the book Mythology when I was a kid like 100 times. I loved mythology, fantasy, sci-fi. I dug it all. I am very committed tonight at 9 p.m. for a certain small budget show on an independent cable network. It's having a series finale tonight, and I promise no spoilers. The show I really loved though was Star Trek. Star Trek. I know, it's so corny. The rocks bounced, the costumes would have gone up in flame if they were even close to one cigarette. They were amazing. William Shatner is visibly chewing the scenery as he goes. The whole thing is terrific. So it's easy to lose sight with all of the corniness of Star Trek and its sort of futuristic vision world building. That, like a lot of other good science fiction and fantasy, it's not so much commenting about how we hope the future will be, but interacting very deeply with what was happening at the time. It was highly unusual when Star Trek premiered for there to be such an interracial cast. That same ethos of how we see the world and how we want to represent it expanded as the subsequent generations of shows were written and aired. I really like the current iteration of Star Trek, which is on CBS. I'm not promoting certain television stations. I should know this is all free, but CBS, call me. We can work something out. I love the current iteration because it says a lot about what our current state of the world is and who is in it. How do we interact with people that we perceive to be different from ourselves? How do we interact with different systems of the world, justice, of economies? Star Trek does a really good job of sort of probing those in storytelling that to a greater or sometimes lesser degree is really fun and engaging to watch. So sci-fi, in short, has this ability to not so much talk about the future as the now. Now, a lot of biblical prophecy does the same thing. We think of the word prophet as someone who is a prognosticator, someone who is a future looker, someone who wants to tell us how the world is going to be later on, that they've shaken their holy crystal ball and this is what's coming up. But most of the times in biblical prophecy, what they're doing is commenting on what's happening right now. They're trying to make sense of the world as they see it, especially when there's trouble. Well, I can tell you there was definitely trouble between the years 68 and 70 AD and the greater Jewish diaspora. Nero was on the throne until 68 when he committed suicide. He was a real troublemaker for a lot of people. He was a troublemaker for the Jews in Jerusalem. He was certainly a troublemaker for this nascent group of kind of Jewish outcasts, sort of who are these people following their dead and risen God. They didn't really have a name for themselves yet. Some referred to them as followers of the way. Now we would just call them Christians. Nero was no friend of Christians, no friend of Jews, really no friend of anyone except for Nero. In 70 AD, as I talked about before, the temple in Jerusalem was obliterated. Not just attacked, but torn to the ground, incinerated. Nothing left but ash, nothing left but rubble. It's very difficult for us, I think, to relate to that. It makes me think more like the bombing of Dresden, 9/11, the Holocaust. It's that level of nothing left but ash. What do you make of their life in your world when the very center of it has been so violently removed? Revelation describes this character, is written by someone who describes himself as John of Patmos. And he addresses it so individually to the reader, sort of a you, dear reader address, that it feels very personal, very intimate. And it says these things are going to happen really soon. It's famous for being this book that paints a bleak picture of what's going to happen. Bleak because it describes a God as a triumphant warrior who's going to come down and do unto others as they have been done unto. That God is going to mimic the kind of violence that Nero's Rome has done unto the Christian communities and the Jewish communities in that part of the world. In short, it is a victim's fantasy of what happens after a trauma. And we know that so often people who have been the victims of violence, abuse of all kinds, are often the same people that become perpetrators of that violence and abuse. It is a fantasy for the most part, this book. And I could give a long lecture about taking apart Revelation piece by piece. I'm not going to do that so you can all exhale a little bit. But at the end of the book, I think we get not more of this violent vision, but I think we get this picture of what we really hope for, what the author really desires. The new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem. The former things passed away. And there he says, behold, the dwelling place of God is with us, with mortals. This is powerful. The dwelling place of God in Jerusalem was the temple. And it wasn't like the outer court where anyone could go. It was like the inner sanctum. You had to have all kinds of things. You'd born the right family, the right training, the right kind of wealth to be able to approach God. God was very, very kept apart. And what the author says that God is not kept apart from us, even in the middle of the worst thing that could possibly happen. God is as close as we are to one another right now. That's a profound vision. I rather wonder if the author of Revelation, who is described as John of Patmos, is not so much describing what he hopes will happen in the future, but what maybe he's experienced through Jesus. So in our gospel text, I think it's been a little confusing here for the season of Easter, because we already have this reading. We had it from Maundy Thursday, and then we had Good Friday, and then we had Easter Vigil and Easter. So we had the Last Supper, the Garden of Gethsemane, the arrest, the trial, the crucifixion, the death, the burial, the resurrection. Jesus has been appearing to his disciples, and now we're going back to that part. What is happening, lectionary? It can be hard to keep track of all this. So if you're confused, just know I'm a little confused too. But maybe what the lectionary is doing is helping us remember what it is to live in a resurrection life. Reminding us that in our resurrection life, we go back to the most important things that Jesus said. So let's get ourselves back in that scene for a second. It's Passover supper. It's an anxious time. The disciples, Jesus, all up in the upper room having dinner, and Judas pieces out because he's about to go and betray Jesus to the secret police. Jesus knows this. It's not a mystery. So our lection starts with Judas leaving. Now, if one of your closest friends was about to leave and rat you out and get you arrested, what would your next words be to the remaining group of people? I am pretty sure that my next words would not be, and God is glorifying me through this moment. And I am dead certain that my next words would not be, I give you a new commandment, love one another just as I have loved you. Love one another is not the new commandment part. Faithful Jewish people have been commanded to love one another since the beginning of time. since the dawn of creation, literally. If you go back, you can see that God's care and love, and that we should be replicating God's care and love for one another, is all over the Hebrew Bible. This is not new. What's new? Love one another just as I have loved you. What are the hallmarks of Jesus' love? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Think about everything you know about Jesus from the biblical stories. What are the things that he did? Because the things that he did, those are the ways that he loved. He healed people regardless of where they were from or what they did. If you were a Syrophoenician woman, an outsider, a Roman centurion's son, if you had been possessed by demons, if you've been blind by birth, love one another just as I have loved you. Heal one another. What else did he do? Fed people. I'd like to point out that Jesus never ever preached before he fed people, so you're always welcome to come to coffee hour before this service if you're hungry before the 10 o'clock. I just need to point that out. He fed them. He made sure everyone had what they needed. Love one another just as I have loved you. Who was an outsider? Who was an insider in Jesus' world? The answer is there was no distinction. Paul later will write, there is no Jew or Greek, there is no slave or free, there is no woman or man, only heirs to the promise of God. That's everybody. Our story from Acts really makes that point clear. As a kid, I imagined one of like my own, My Little Pony cartoon sheets descending with a whole bunch of weird food. That'll work as a vision, as an aid to memoir. But Peter describes this vision that he had. Nothing that I have made is unclean. Everything has been sanctified by God. You don't have to have the right diet, the proper haircut. Your clothes don't have to be any particular way. You don't have to have altered your body in any way to be part of this family of God. Love one another just as I have loved you. That love is for everyone. That love is not a sentiment. Although sentiments are nice. But love is an action. It is a verb. It is a living thing. Just as I have loved you. Now, there is a part of me that wants to buy in a little bit to the prophetic vision of Revelation. I confess. Sometimes when I look at what people want to do to one another, I want a triumphalist God that's going to come down and kick some butt. It would feel really good for a minute. But Jesus didn't say, when everything is perfect, when the world is better, and the people that you like hold power, and the laws that you prefer are enacted, when it's all happening just the way you want, then you can love one another. But until then, you can just be as violent and vengeful as you care to be. That's not what he said. In fact, in the moment where he knows that violence against his own person is about to happen, he says, love one another just as I have loved you. That, to me, is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. We're not called to sit and wait for God to do the thing that God is going to do. We're called to participate in what God is already doing. Behold, the dwelling place of God is right here and right now. May it be true for me.